Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the cradle of civilization, to the sun-scorched plains of ancient Sumer, where the air smells of dust and destiny, and time itself trickles through clay bowls. Picture yourself in a world of mud-brick cities, where the Euphrates River glints like a lazy serpent under a relentless sun. And every hour is measured not by ticking gears, but by the slow drip of water. This is the story of how the Sumerians, those clever folks who invented writing and wheels, also wrestled time into submission with their quirky water clocks. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive a day here, not with the heat, the grit, and the fact that your morning coffee is just a distant dream replaced by barley beer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's always wild to see who's drifting off with us across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up, and the first thing you notice is the heat. It's not just warm, it's a full-body assault. Like the sun god Utu himself decided to crank the thermostat to inferno. You're lying on a reed mat in a mud brick hut, the walls radiating warmth like a clay oven. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of dust, straw, and something faintly like old lentils. Your blanket, a scratchy weave of wool, sticks to your skin, and you're already sweating before your eyes fully open. This is ancient Sumer, around 3000 BCE, in the bustling city of Uruk, where the day starts not with an alarm, but with the distant bleat of goats and the low hum of a city waking up. You roll off the mat, your bare feet hitting the packed dirt floor, which is cool for about 3 seconds before it starts feeling like a skillet. Your hut is small, maybe 10 feet square, with no windows, just a low doorway covered by a reed curtain that flaps lazily in the morning breeze. Outside, the world is already moving. You hear the clatter of clay pots, the chatter of neighbors, and the rhythmic slap of sandals on dusty paths. Your family, parents, siblings, maybe a cranky aunt shares this one-room wonder, and privacy is as mythical as a dragon. You're not alone, though. A couple of fleas have already claimed your tunic as their personal estate. Your tunic, by the way, is a simple linen affair, knee-length and slightly stiff from yesterday's sweat. It's not exactly high fashion, but it's practical for a day of labor under a sun that doesn't believe in mercy. You splash your face with water from a clay jar, careful not to waste a drop. This stuff is hauled from the Euphrates, and it's not exactly sparkling clean. The water tastes faintly of silt, and you're pretty sure you just swallowed a grain of sand. Breakfast is a quick affair, a hunk of barley bread, dense as a brick, and a sip of weak beer. Coffee. Not for another few millennia. This beer, though, is safer than water. Brewed to kill off the river's invisible nasties. As you chew, you notice a faint dripping sound from the corner of the hut. It's not a leak. It's your family's water clock, a simple clay bowl with a tiny hole at the bottom, slowly leaking water into another pot below. This is how Sumerians keep time. And it's your first clue that today is going to revolve around this odd, dripping invention. You're no scholar, but even you know this clock is a big deal. It's not just about knowing when to milk the goats. It's about organizing a whole society, from farmers to priests to kings. Historians still argue whether these clocks were invented for practical needs or to please the gods. But one thing's clear in Sumer: time is power, and water is its keeper. You step outside, blinking against the sunlight, and the city of Uruk sprawls before you. Mud brick houses huddled together, their flat roofs baking under the sky. In the distance, the ziggurat looms, a stepped pyramid where priests commune with the heavens. The streets are alive with people, merchants hauling grain, kids chasing stray dogs, and women balancing water jars on their heads. You're just a farmer's kid, destined to spend your day in the fields. But that dripping clock in your hut is about to shape every moment of it. You take a deep breath, already regretting it, as a cloud of dust tickles your throat, and start your trek to the fields. Time, as the Sumerians measure it, is already slipping away, one drop at a time. You're trudging through the dusty streets of Uruk, the sun climbing higher and already turning your tunic into a damp rag. The Euphrates River glints in the distance, its muddy waters carving a lifeline through the parched Sumerian plain. This river isn't just a pretty view, it's the beating heart of this civilization. And it's got everything to do with those dripping water clocks you're starting to notice everywhere. You pass a merchant's stall, where a clay bowl with a hole in its base sits proudly, water trickling out as he haggles over barley. Time, you're learning, isn't just a concept here, it's a commodity, measured as carefully as grain or silver. The Euphrates is Sumer's answer to Egypt's Nile, but it's a moodier cousin. It floods unpredictably, sometimes drowning fields, sometimes leaving them bone dry. You've heard your father curse its whims, but you've also seen him pray to Enki, the god of water, for a good harvest. This river shapes everything: your crops, your meals, your survival. And it's no surprise it shaped how Sumerians think about time. Without the Euphrates, there'd be no irrigation canals, no fertile fields, no cities like Uruk. And without its steady flow, those water clocks wouldn't exist either. You pause by a canal, watching water ripple through the reeds, and it hits you. The river doesn't just feed you, it measures your days. Water clocks, or clepsydra, as later folks will call them, are a Sumerian stroke of genius. Historians point to clay artifacts from around 3500 BCE, found in Uruk's ruins, as some of the earliest evidence of these devices. They're simple but brilliant: a bowl with a small hole at the bottom, filled with water that drips out at a steady rate into another container. When the water's gone, a set time has passed, maybe an hour, maybe a chunk of the morning. You've seen your neighbor use one to time his baking, but it's more than a kitchen gadget. These clocks organize labor, trade, and even worship, tying human life to the river's rhythm. You keep walking, dodging a stray goat that's decided the path is its personal buffet. Your sandals, really just leather straps tied to your feet, kick up clouds of dust. And you're already dreaming of the shade you won't get until noon. You pass a potter's workshop, where a kid is refilling a water clock while his master shapes clay. The kid's job is to keep the clock dripping, ensuring the potter doesn't lose track of his firing schedule. You smirk, thinking how you'd probably forget to refill it and ruin a whole batch of pots. Timing is everything here, and Sumerians are obsessive about it, probably because the river's floods don't exactly follow a calendar. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Sumerian water clocks were decorated with star patterns, hinting at a connection to the night sky. Scholars think priests might have used them to track celestial events, like the rising of certain stars, to plan rituals. It's not hard to imagine those priests were always staring at the heavens, claiming the gods sent messages in the stars. But not everyone agrees on the clock's purpose. Historians still argue whether they were mainly for practical tasks, like managing irrigation shifts, or for sacred duties, like timing prayers to appease Enki. You're no expert, but you're betting it's both. In Sumer, nothing's just practical, everything's got a divine angle. You reach the edge of the city, where the fields stretch out, green and gold under the relentless sun. The Euphrates feeds these fields through a web of canals, each one dug by hand and maintained by folks like you. You spot another water clock near a canal gate, its steady drip deciding when to open the sluice and flood the barley. Your father's already out there, knee-deep in mud, shouting at you to hurry up. You groan, wishing you could have stayed in bed. But that dripping clock doesn't care about your feelings. It's telling you to move, to work, to keep up with the river's rhythm. As you grab a wooden hoe, you notice the other farmers glancing at the clock, too. It's not just about getting the job done. It's about doing it on time. If the water flows too long, the field floods. Too short, and the crops wither. The Euphrates gives life, but it demands precision. And those water clocks are the only thing keeping chaos at bay. You wipe sweat from your brow, already feeling like a baked brick, and start digging. The drip, drip, drip of the clock is your new boss, and it's not taking lunch breaks. You're tied to the river now, just like everyone else. And time is slipping away faster than you'd like. You're out in the fields now. The Euphrates glinting nearby like a smug overseer. Its waters feeding the barley you're sweating over. The sun's climbing higher, turning your tunic into a soggy second skin, and your hands are already caked with mud. That water clock by the canal gate is still dripping, its steady rhythm dictating when you'll get a break if you're lucky. You're starting to resent that clay bowl, sitting there all smug, leaking time while you haul dirt. But as you glance around Uruk's bustling outskirts, you realize these water clocks are everywhere, quietly shaping the chaos of Sumerian life. They're not just tools. They're the heartbeat of a city that's figured out how to tame time itself. You pause to catch your breath, leaning on your hoe, and watch a group of merchants trudging past, their donkeys laden with sacks of grain. One of them is fiddling with a small water clock, a portable version no bigger than a melon, checking it as he argues with his partner about delivery times. This is where water clocks started, right here in the markets of Uruk, where trade and time became inseparable. Historians pinpoint the late 4th millennium BCE as the birth of these devices, with archaeological finds showing simple clay vessels used to measure short intervals. They weren't fancy, think a terracotta pot with a hole punched in the bottom, but they were revolutionary. In a world without sundials that work at night or mechanical gears, water clocks gave Sumerians a way to slice the day into manageable chunks. You wipe your brow, flicking away a fly that's decided your face is prime real estate. And think about how these clocks must have felt like magic when they first appeared. Imagine being a trader back then, haggling over sesame oil, and instead of guessing when your shift ends, you've got this dripping bowl telling you exactly how long you've been at it. It's not just practical, it's power. You smirk, picturing yourself trying to sell a goat while keeping one eye on a water clock, probably spilling it in the process. But for Sumerians, this was serious business. Markets ran smoother, deals were timed, and nobody could cheat by claiming it's not noon yet. Here's a quirky bit: some early water clocks were found with tiny carvings of fish or reeds, maybe as a nod to the Euphrates, or just because Sumerians couldn't resist decorating everything. You can almost see a potter scratching a fish into the clay, chuckling as he hands it to a merchant who'll never notice. But there's debate about how widespread these clocks were at first. Historians still argue whether they were common in markets or mostly reserved for temples and palaces in their early days. You're betting on the markets, given how obsessed Uruk's traders seem with timing their deals. Every stall you pass has one, dripping away like a metronome for commerce. You get back to work, hacking at the soil, your arms already complaining. The water clock by the canal is your guide, telling you when to open the gate and let the river flood the field. Too early, and you've drowned the crops. Too late, and they shrivel. You glance at it, noting the water levels dropped halfway. Your father shouts something about not slacking, and you mutter under your breath, wishing you could dunk him in the canal. The clock doesn't care about your family drama, though. Its drip is relentless, A reminder that time in Sumer isn't yours, it belongs to the fields, the river, and the city. You spot a kid refilling the clock, carefully pouring water from a jar, while an older farmer watches like it's a sacred ritual. It's not far off. Water clocks aren't just about practicality. They're tied to the Sumerian obsession with order. You've heard stories of priests using them to time prayers, claiming the gods demand precision. Out here in the fields, it's less divine and more about survival. But the principle's the same. The Euphrates gives you water, and the clock makes sure you use it wisely. You shake your head, wondering how anyone keeps track of all these drips without losing their mind. Probably why scribes get paid more than farmers. As you dig, you notice the other farmers syncing their work to the clock's rhythm. One guy's hauling mud to reinforce the canal bank. Another's checking the barley's growth, all glancing at that dripping bowl like it's their boss. You grin, thinking how your modern self would have smashed that thing by now, demanding a digital watch instead. But here, in the Sumerian heat, with the river's hum in your ears, you're starting to get it. Water clocks aren't just measuring time, they're holding this whole world together, one drop at a time. You sigh, pick up your hoe, and keep working. The drip, drip, drip is your soundtrack now, and it's not letting you off easy. You're still out here in the fields, the Euphrates shimmering in the distance like it's mocking your sweat-soaked tunic. The water clock by the canal keeps dripping, its relentless rhythm reminding you that time in Sumer isn't something you own, it's something you chase. Your hands ache from gripping the hoe, and your back's staging a full rebellion. But you can't stop. Not yet. The sun's creeping toward its peak, and the fields are only half irrigated. You glance at that clay bowl, its water level lower now, and curse under your breath. You're starting to see why the Sumerians were so obsessed with these things. But now, you're about to get a closer look at their sacred side. Because your fathers just waved you over to head to the temple, apparently, it's time to pay respects to the gods and their water clocks. You trudge toward Uruk's ziggurat, its massive stepped silhouette looming over the city like a stairway to the heavens. The temple district is a different world from the dusty fields. Here, the air smells of incense and baked clay, and the streets are cleaner, swept by temple workers who move with quiet purpose. You pass priests in white linen robes, their heads shaved, muttering prayers as they carry clay tablets. The ziggurat's base is bustling with activity offerings of grain, goats, and oil being carted in, all timed to perfection. And there, near the temple's entrance, you spotted a water clock, larger and fancier than the one in your hut. Its clay surface etched with symbols of the moon god Nana. This isn't just a tool, it's a sacred instrument, guarded by priests who treat it like a divine oracle. Water clocks in Sumerian temples were a big deal, and historians back this up with finds from sites like Nippur, where temple records from around 2800 BCE mention water vessels for measuring the hours of prayer. These weren't your average market drippers. They were crafted with precision, sometimes lined with bitumen to prevent leaks, and calibrated to track specific rituals. You stand there, a little awestruck, watching a priest refill the clock with water from a bronze jug. His movements slow and deliberate. It's not just about keeping time, it's about keeping the gods happy. The Sumerians believed the universe ran on order, and if prayers weren't offered at the exact right moment, the gods might get cranky. Think floods, famines, or a sudden swarm of locusts. You chuckle, imagining a god throwing a tantrum because a priest was 5 minutes late. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some temple water clocks were paired with small statues of water gods, like Enki, as if the divine was literally watching the drips. You can picture a priest sneaking a glance at one, hoping Enki's not judging his pouring skills. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether these clocks were primarily for religious ceremonies or if they doubled as administrative tools to schedule temple workers. You're leaning toward the religious angle, given how seriously this priest is glaring at the clock, like it's about to spill divine secrets. You're ushered into the temple's courtyard, where the air is thick with the scent of burning myrrh. The water clock's drip is louder here, echoing off the stone walls, and you realize it's timing a ritual. Priests are chanting, offering a barley to Nana, and every verse seems synced to the clock's rhythm. You're supposed to bow, but you're distracted, watching the water level drop. It's hypnotic, almost soothing, like a lullaby made of liquid. You smirk, thinking how your modern self would have brought a stopwatch and ruined the vibe. But here, in the temple's shadow, you get it. Time isn't just practical, it's holy. The gods demand precision, and the priests deliver it, one drip at a time. Your father nudges you to focus, and you mumble a prayer, hoping you got the words right. The priest by the clock gives you a side-eye, and you wonder if he's judging your muddy sandals or your half-hearted chanting. You're not cut out for temple life, that's for sure. As the ritual wraps up, you're sent back to the fields, but not before catching a glimpse of another clock being refilled. It's a reminder even the gods are on a schedule. And in Sumer, water clocks make sure nobody mortal or divine misses their cue. You trudge back, the ziggurat fading behind you, and the drip, drip, drip of that sacred clock lingers in your ears. It's not just measuring time, it's measuring devotion. And you're starting to feel the weight of both. You're back in the fields now. The ziggurats shadow a distant memory as the Euphrates glints nearby. Its waters feeding the barley you're still wrestling with. The sun's at its peak, turning your tunic into a soggy testament to human endurance. And your hands are blistered from the hoe. That water clock by the canal is still dripping, its clay surface baking in the heat. And it's starting to feel like your personal nemesis. Every drop is a reminder that your day's work is far from over. You're a farmer's kid, and in ancient Sumer, that means your life revolves around the rhythm of the fields and the water clocks that keep them alive. You squat by the canal, splashing muddy water on your face to cool off, though it mostly just smears the dirt around. Your father's shouting at you to check the irrigation gate, and you glance at the water clock to see how much time you've got before the next flood. It's half empty, meaning you've got maybe an hour before you need to open the sluice. This is how Sumerian farmers like you survive by sinking your labor to the drip of these clay bowls. Historians note that around 3000 BCE, water clocks were critical for irrigation in Sumer, with texts from describing their use to allocate water fairly among farmers. Without them, you'd either drown your crops or starve them, and neither's great for your family's dinner plans. You trudge over to the gate, your sandals squelching in the mud, and adjust the wooden sluice. The water clock's drip is your guide, and you're starting to appreciate its precision, even if it feels like a bossy ant who never shuts up. You grin, imagining your modern self trying to set a timer on your phone, only to realize there's no signal in 3000 BCE. Out here, the clock's simplicity is its strength, no batteries, no gears, just water and gravity. But it's not foolproof. You've seen clocks clog with silt or crack in the heat, and when that happens, its chaos fields flood. Neighbors argue, and someone's always blaming you for not watching the drip closely enough. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some farmers painted their water clocks with red ochre, maybe to ward off bad luck or just to make them look less boring. You can picture yourself sneaking a dab of paint on yours, hoping it'll impress the neighbor's daughter, only to get a lecture from your father about wasting resources. But there's a debate about how farmers used these clocks. Historians still argue whether they were shared communally, with one clock serving a whole village, or if wealthier farmers had their own. You're betting on shared ones, given how everyone in your field keeps eyeing the same clay bowl like it's the village oracle. You open the gate, and water rushes into the field, turning the dry soil into a glistening patchwork. The other farmers nod in approval, and you feel a tiny spark of pride, quickly extinguished by the thought of the next task clearing weeds. You glance at the clock again, its water level dropping steadily, and realize it's not just timing the irrigation, it's timing your whole day. Morning planting, midday watering, evening harvest all pegged to that relentless drip. You mutter a half-hearted prayer to Enki, the water god you met at the temple, hoping he'll keep the river flowing and the clock accurate. Your father overhears and grumbles about your lack of piety, but you're too tired to care. As you yank weeds, you notice the other farmers moving in sync with the clock's rhythm. One guy's hauling mud to reinforce the canal bank, another's checking the barley's growth, all glancing at that dripping bowl like it's their lifeline. You smirk, thinking how your modern self would have demanded a smartwatch by now, only to realize it'd be useless in this heat. But here, in the Sumerian fields, with the river's hum and the clock's drip in your ears, you're starting to understand. Water clocks aren't just about keeping time, they're about keeping order, making sure the Euphrates gift doesn't turn into a curse. You wipe sweat from your brow, already dreaming of the barley beer you'll sip tonight, and keep working. The drip, drip, drip is your rhythm now, and it's not letting you slow down. You're still knee-deep in the Sumerian fields, the Euphrates' muddy waters gurgling through the canal as the sun hammers down like it's got a personal grudge. Your tunic's a soggy mess, and your hands are raw from yanking weeds. But the water clock by the irrigation gate keeps dripping, its clay bowl unbothered by your misery. That relentless drip, drip, drip is your lifeline, timing the flood that'll keep your barley alive. You're starting to respect it, even if you secretly want to punt it into the river. But now, your father's waving you over to the edge of the field, where a scribe's arrived, tablet in hand, to check the harvest records. Time, you're about to learn, isn't just for farmers, it's the scribe's obsession. And their water clocks are the key to Sumer's bureaucracy. You trudge over, wiping mud off your hands, and the scribe barely glances at you. He's too busy squinting at his clay tablet, stylus poised, muttering about grain quotas. Next to him sits a water clock, smaller than the one by the canal but fancier, its rim etched with wedge-shaped cuneiform. He's using it to time his work, ensuring he records every sack of barley before the market closes. You hover awkwardly, trying not to look like you're eavesdropping, but you're fascinated. Scribes are the rock stars of Uruk literate, respected, and barred from breaking their backs in the fields. You smirk, thinking how your modern self would have flunked scribe school faster than you could spill a water clock. Scribes in Sumer were timekeeping wizards, and historians back this up with finds from sites like Lagash, where cuneiform tablets from 2500 BCE detail water clocks used for administrative tasks. These weren't just for show. They tracked labor shifts, tax collections, and trade deals. The scribe's clock is precise. Its drips calibrated to measure short intervals, maybe a quarter of an hour. You watch him tap the tablet, marking the time your family's harvest was weighed, and you realize this clock is more than a tool. It's a record of your life's work, etched into clay for the king's archives. Without it, your barley might as well not exist. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scribes added tiny clay beads to their water clocks, floating on the surface to mark time more clearly, like ancient hourglass sand. You can imagine yourself accidentally swallowing one, thinking it's a stray lentil, and getting a stern lecture from the scribe. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether scribes used water clocks mainly for precision or as a status symbol to flaunt their literacy. You're leaning toward precision, given how this guy's glaring at his clock like it's about to betray him to the tax collector. You shift your weight, your sandals sinking into the mud, and the scribe finally notices you. He barks an order to fetch another sack of barley, and you scurry off, grumbling about how scribes get to sit in the shade while you're out here roasting. As you haul the sack, you notice other farmers lining up, each waiting for their turn under the scribe's watchful eye. The water clock's drip sets the pace, ensuring nobody lingers too long or sneaks an extra sack past the record. You grin, picturing your modern self trying to bribe the scribe with a coffee that doesn't exist yet. In Sumer, though, time is currency, and the scribe's clock is the bank. You drop the sack at his feet, and he marks another tally, the clock's water level dropping steadily. You're starting to see how these clocks tie everything together: fields, markets, temples, even the king's palace. Without them, the whole system would collapse into a mess of missed deadlines and uncounted grain. You glance at the canal clock, still dripping away, and realize it's not just your field's rhythm, it's the scribe's too. The Euphrates feeds the fields. The clocks measure the work, and the scribes write it all down. You're just a small part of this machine, but for a moment, you feel connected to something bigger until your father yells at you to get back to weeding. As you head back to the field, the scribe's stylus scratches on, and the water clock keeps dripping. You're exhausted, but there's no slacking off. Not with that clay bowl watching your every move. You mutter a half-hearted curse at the sun, wishing you could be a scribe instead, sitting in the shade with a fancy clock. But deep down, you know those drips are keeping Uruk alive, turning chaos into order, one drop at a time. You pick up your hoe, the distant ziggurat glinting under the sky, and get back to work. The clock's not stopping, and neither are you. You're back in the fields, the Euphrates' muddy waters trickling through the canal as the sun beats down like it's trying to forge you into a clay tablet. Your tunic's a damp, gritty disaster, and your hands are screaming from the hoe. But that water clock by the irrigation gate keeps dripping, its relentless rhythm a constant nag. You're starting to feel like it's personally judging your weeding skills. The scribe's long gone, his fancy cuneiform-covered clock tucked away with his tablets, but the memory of his shaded spot lingers. Now, though, you're hearing rumors of a royal visit to the fields, and that means one thing: the king's coming, and he is obsessed with time. You're about to see water clocks in action at the top of Sumer's food chain. You trudge toward the ledge of the field, where a crowd's gathering: farmers, overseers, even a few temple priests, all buzzing with nervous energy. The king, or Lugal, rarely shows up in person, but when he does, it's a big deal. You spot his entourage approaching, a procession of linen-robed attendants, bronze-tipped spears glinting, and a massive water clock carried on a wooden stand, its clay surface etched with royal seals. This isn't your family's chipped bowl. It's a masterpiece, polished and precise, dripping time like it's dispensing divine favor. You stand there, muddy and sweaty, feeling like a stray goat at a wedding. As the king steps forward, his beard oiled to perfection. Kings in Sumer were timekeeping fanatics, and historians confirm this with records from Ur, around 2600 BCE, showing rulers using water clocks to schedule everything from military drills to temple offerings. This Lugal, let's call him Gilgamesh, though he's probably not that. Gilgamesh demands precision. He's here to inspect the harvest, and his water clock is timing the whole event, ensuring every field is checked before the sun sets. You watch an attendant adjust the clock, pouring water with the focus of a priest offering to Enki. The king's not just checking crops, he's asserting control, showing everyone that even time bends to his will. You smirk, Imagining your modern self trying to explain a smartwatch to this guy, he'd probably have you sacrificed for witchcraft. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some royal water clocks were filled with scented water, maybe infused with myrrh, to make the king's timekeeping feel extra divine. You can picture yourself accidentally sneezing into it, ruining the royal vibe, and earning a one-way trip to the dungeon. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether kings used water clocks to micromanage their subjects or to project divine authority by aligning with cosmic order. You're betting on both, given how this Lugal keeps glancing at the clock like it's his personal oracle, while the overseers scramble to look busy. The king starts speaking, his voice booming about the harvest's importance to Uruk's glory. You're supposed to listen, but you're distracted by the clock's drip. Its water level droppings, the attendant marks time with a clay stylus. The priests nearby are nodding, probably thrilled that the king's schedule aligns with their sacred rituals. You roll your eyes, thinking how your field's clock is way less glamorous, just a chipped bowl that leaks when it's too hot. But you get why the king's so fixated. Time is power. If he controls the harvest schedule, he controls the food, the trade, the city, and those water clocks make it possible, turning the Euphrates' flow into a royal command. As the procession leaves, you notice the farmers relaxing, their eyes still on the canal's water clock. It's back to your regular drip now. No royal fanfare. Just the same old rhythm. You grab your hoe, the king's clock fading into the distance, but its echo lingers. You're starting to see how these clocks aren't just for fields or temples, they're for rulers too, tying Uruk's chaos into a single, dripping thread. The sun's dipping lower, and you're exhausted. But the clock doesn't care. You mutter a half-hearted curse at the river, wishing you could be a king with a fancy clock instead of a farmer with blisters. But the drip, drip, drip keeps going. And so do you. The king's procession has vanished, leaving only dust and the faint echo of his fancy water clock's drip in your mind. You're back in the fields, the Euphrates gurgling nearby like it's laughing at your blisters. The sun's starting its slow descent, but it's still hot enough to make your tunic feel like a wet sack of regret. That canal-side water clock keeps dripping, its clay bowl a silent taskmaster, reminding you to check the irrigation gate before the barley drowns. You're bone-tired, but the day's not done. And now you're headed to the temple again, this time for a different reason, a heated debate about time and the gods. You're about to overhear priests arguing over whether those water clocks are really channeling divine will or just glorified buckets. You slog through Uruk's streets, the ziggurat looming ahead like a grumpy mountain. The temple district hums with activity, priests chanting, goats bleating, and the sharp scent of incense cutting through the dusty air. You're not here for a ritual, though. Your father sent you to deliver a sack of barley as an offering, probably hoping it'll buy some divine favor for next year's harvest. As you approach the temple courtyard, you spot a group of priests huddled near a water clock, this one even grander than the king's, its surface glazed with blue and gold. They're arguing, voices low but intense, and you linger, pretending to adjust your sandal while eavesdropping. In Sumer, time isn't just practical, it's a theological minefield, and these priests are diving right in. The Sumerians saw time as a gift from the gods, and historians back this with cuneiform texts from Nippur, around 2700 BCE, describing water clocks as tools to align human tasks with divine cycles. The priests you're spying on are debating whether the clock's drips reflect the will of Enki, the water god, or if they're just a human trick to mimic cosmic order. One priest, with a beard long enough to trip over, insists the clocks are sacred, their water blessed by Enki himself. Another, younger and snippier, argues they're just tools, no holier than a plow. You stifle a chuckle, imagining your modern self jumping in with a quip about atomic clocks, then getting exiled for blasphemy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests believed water clocks could predict divine anger, claiming a sudden clog meant Enki was displeased. You picture yourself as a priest, panicking over a stuck hole and blaming it on someone's bad prayers, probably your cousin's. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether Sumerians thought water clocks were divine instruments or practical devices with a religious veneer. You're siding with the divine angle, given how these priests are practically worshiping the thing. One of them stroking its rim like it's a pet. You edge closer, the barley sack heavy on your shoulder, and catch more of the argument. The older priest says the clocks ensure prayers are offered at the exact moment the gods demand, syncing Uruk with the heavens. The younger one scoffs, pointing out that clocks leak differently in heat or cold. So how can they be divine? You smirk, thinking how your field's clock definitely slows down when it's baking, making your workday feel like eternity. The debate's getting heated, and you're tempted to chime in. But your father's glare from across the courtyard says, don't even think about it. You settle for dropping the barley and lingering, watching the clocks drip like it might spill divine secrets. The priests move on to discussing star alignments, claiming the clocks help time rituals to match celestial events. You've heard this before. Your uncle swears the moon god Nana gets cranky if offerings are late. You roll your eyes, wishing you could fast forward to a world with digital timers and air conditioning. But as you listen, you get why this matters. In Sumer, time isn't just about work. It's about keeping the gods from smiting you. The water clock's drip is like a heartbeat, tying prayers to the cosmos. And these priests are its keepers. You grin, picturing your modern self trying to explain daylight savings to them. Good luck with that. You head back to the fields, the priest's voices fading behind you, the canal clock's still dripping, and you check it, noting the water's almost gone. Time to open the gate again. You're exhausted, but the temple's debate lingers, making you wonder if Enki's really watching those drips, or if it's all just human fussing. Either way, the clock's not letting you slack off. You grab the sluice, the Euphrates hum in your ears, and get back to work. The drip, drip, drip is your rhythm, divine or not, and it's pulling you through another scorching Sumerian day. The sun's dipping lower now, painting the Sumerian sky in shades of orange as the Euphrates shimmers like molten copper. You're trudging back from the temple, the priest's debate about divine drips still buzzing in your head. But the fields are behind you for the day. Your tunic's a gritty, sweat-soaked disaster, and your blisters have blisters. But there's no rest yet. Tonight, you've been roped into guarding the village's grain stores, a job nobody wants, but everyone's stuck with sometimes. Under the starlit sky, with the cool night air finally easing your sunburn, you'll see how water clocks keep time when the sun's gone, working alongside the heavens to keep Uruk safe. You're not thrilled, but at least it's quieter than dodging your father's shouts in the fields. You reach the village outskirts, where mudbrick granaries squat like silent sentinels. The air smells of dry barley and dust, a relief after the day's mix of canal mud and incense. Your job's simple: watch the stores, scare off thieves, and don't fall asleep. Easy, right? Except you're already half dead from weeding, and the night's long. You're handed a spear, more a pointy stick than a weapon, and led to a small platform overlooking the granaries. There, sitting on a clay pedestal, is a water clock, its surface faintly glowing in the moonlight. It's smaller than the temple's, but its steady drip is your guide, timing your watch shifts under the stars. You settle in, the night's chill seeping through your tunic, and try not to think about how you'd rather be dreaming of barley beer. Water clocks were crucial for nighttime tasks in Sumer, and historians point to texts from Gursu, around 2500 BCE, describing their use for guard duties and nocturnal rituals. Without sunlight, Sundials were useless, but water clocks didn't care about day or night. This one's calibrated to measure your shift maybe 4 hours, though it feels like eternity. You watch the water drip into a lower bowl, each drop glinting like a tiny star. The stars themselves are your backup, their slow march across the sky a rough check on the clock's accuracy. You've heard priests talk about constellations, naming them after gods and heroes. And you squint up, trying to spot the one shaped like a bull. You smirk, thinking your modern self would have brought a telescope and a thermos of coffee fat chance here. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some night guards tied reeds to their water clocks, letting them float to mark time, like a Sumerian version of a bobber in fishing. You can imagine yourself fumbling with one, accidentally knocking it over and spending the night explaining why the grain got stolen. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether water clocks were the primary nighttime timekeepers or if Sumerians relied more on star observations. With clocks as a backup, you're betting on the clocks, given how this one's drip is practically hypnotizing you. Each drop pulling you closer to dozing off. You shake yourself awake, gripping the spear tighter, and scan the shadows for movement. The village is quiet, save for the occasional bleat of a goat or a distant dog's bark. The water clock's drip is your only company, its rhythm syncing with the faint hum of crickets. You glance at the stars again, remembering the priest's obsession with celestial order. They'd say the gods are watching, and this clock's making sure you're not slacking. You mutter a half-hearted prayer to Nana, the moon god, hoping he's not too picky about your posture. The night's cool, but your feet are numb from standing, and you're starting to regret not grabbing an extra blanket. A fellow guard, an older guy with a beard like a bird's nest, shuffles over to check the clock. He grunts, noting the water's halfway gone, and tells you to stay sharp. Thieves love the dark. You nod, trying to look alert, but your eyes keep drifting to the clock's drip. It's oddly soothing, like the temple's chants, but less preachy. You grin, picturing your modern self trying to set an alarm app for guard duty, only to realize there's no Wi-Fi in Uruk. But here, under the Sumerian stars, with the Euphrates' distant murmur and the clock's steady drip, you're starting to feel the night's rhythm. The gods might be watching, but it's the water clock keeping you on track. One drop at a time, you shift your weight, spear in hand, and settle in for the long haul. The stars are bright above Uruk now, their cold light spilling across the granaries you're guarding, while the Euphrates hums softly in the distance. The night air's chilly, a sharp contrast to the day's scorching heat, and your tunic's finally dry, though it's still gritty with field dust. That water clock on its clay pedestal keeps dripping, its steady rhythm marking your watch shift as you clutch your pointy stick spear. You're fighting to stay awake, your legs numb from standing, but the clock's drip, drip, drip is both a lifeline and a lullaby, keeping you tethered to your duty. Tonight, though, you're not alone in watching time. As you scan the shadows, you notice flickering lamplight from a nearby hut, where a woman's tending a water clock of her own. You're about to learn that in Sumer, timekeeping isn't just for priests or kings, it's women's work, too. Quiet but essential. You lean against the platform, careful not to tip over the clock, and watch the woman through the hut's open doorway. She's refilling a small clay bowl, her movements precise despite the late hour. She's probably timing something domestic, maybe bread baking or a child's medicine dose, but it's clear she's as tied to the drip as you are. In Sumer, women often managed household time, a role that's less flashy than the priest's temple rituals, but just as crucial. Historians point to cuneiform records from Sippar, around 2400 BCE, mentioning women using water clocks for tasks like brewing beer or tracking weaving shifts. These weren't fancy devices like the king's gilded one you saw earlier. They were simple, like the chipped bowl in your field, but they kept families fed and homes running. You shift your weight, trying to warm your toes, and think about your mother back home, who's probably doing the same thing right now. She's always got a water clock going, timing the porridge or the laundry soak, though laundry here means beating tunics against river rocks. You smirk, imagining your modern self offering her a washing machine, only to get a blank stare and a lecture about wasting water. Women like her don't get statues or cuneiform praise. But without their clocks, the whole village would grind to a halt. You've seen her check the drip before dawn, making sure the family's day starts on time, and it hits you. Those drips are as much her domain as the fields are your father's. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women's water clocks had tiny clay figurines baked into the rim, maybe to honor Inanna, the goddess of love and war, as if she's blessing their chores. You can picture yourself as a kid, sneaking one of those figurines to play with, only to get a swift swat from your mother for messing with her clock. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether women's timekeeping was a formal role or just an unspoken duty passed down through families. You're betting on unspoken. Given how nobody in your village ever brags about their mother's clock skills, it's just expected. Like breathing, you glance at the guard clock, its water level dropping steadily, and realize your shift's halfway done. The woman in the hut is still working, her lamplight flickering as she adjusts the clock again. You feel a pang of respect, mixed with exhaustion, knowing she's probably been at it since before you woke up this morning. Guarding's tough, but at least you get to stand still. She's juggling a dozen tasks while keeping that drip on track. You mutter a quiet thanks to Inanna, hoping she's watching over both of you, and scan the granaries for trouble. The night's quiet, save for the clock's drip and a distant owl's hoot. But you're not taking chances. Your fellow guard shuffles over, grumbling about the cold, and checks the clock with a squint. He nods, satisfied. And you wonder if he's ever thought about the women keeping time back home. Probably not. He's too busy complaining about his sore feet. You grin, picturing your modern self trying to explain work-life balance to him, only to get a blank stare and a grunt. But here, in the Sumerian night, with the stars above and the Euphrates murmur below, you're starting to see the bigger picture. Water clocks aren't just for fields or temples, they're for homes, too, tying everyone together in a web of drips. You grip your spear, the clock's rhythm steady in your ears, and settle back into the watch. The drip, drip, drip is your guide, and it's keeping the whole village ticking. The night's grown colder now, the Sumerian stars blazing above Uruk like a celestial quilt, while the Euphrates murmurs in the distance, its waters invisible but ever-present. You're still guarding the granaries, your spear more a prop than a weapon, and your legs are screaming from hours of standing. That water clock on its clay pedestal keeps dripping, its steady rhythm marking your watch shift, though it's starting to feel like it's mocking your exhaustion. The woman tending her household clock is long out of sight, but her quiet diligence lingers in your mind. Now, as you scan the shadows, you're thinking about time itself, not just the dripping water, but how Sumerians measure it against other methods. You're about to realize that water clocks, for all their cleverness, have a rival sand timers. Spoiler, they're not as great as they sound. You shift your weight, trying to keep your feet from turning into mud brick, and glance at the clock. Its water level's low, signaling your shift's nearing its end. Thank the gods. You've been watching those drips all night, but now you notice a trader's cart parked nearby, a crude sand timer tied to its side. It's just a glass bulb filled with sand, trickling from one chamber to another, probably used to time short deals. You've seen these before, but they're rare. Most folks stick to water clocks, like the one keeping you awake. You squint at the sand timer, its grains barely moving in the moonlight, and wonder why anyone would bother with it when water's so reliable. Turns out, sand's got issues, and Sumerians knew it. Water clocks were the gold standard in Sumer, with archaeological evidence from Eridu, around 2600 BCE, showing their widespread use for everything from farming to rituals. They were reliable, easy to make, and tied to the Euphrates' life-giving flow. Sand timers, on the other hand, were a later experiment, likely borrowed from neighboring regions like Elam. They're finicky sand clumps in humid air, sticks in narrow necks, and runs unevenly if the timer's tilted. You've heard traders curse them when a deal goes sour because the sand lied. You smirk, imagining your modern self trying to pitch a sand timer to a Sumerian farmer, only to get laughed back to the 21st century. Water clocks, with their steady drip, win every time in Uruk's dusty streets. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some sand timers were made with crushed eggshells instead of sand, supposedly for smoother flow, though you're betting it just made a mess. You can picture yourself as a trader, shaking one out and getting shell dust in your eyes, then swearing off timers forever. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether sand timers were a serious attempt at timekeeping in Sumer, or just a novelty for travelers who couldn't carry water clocks. You're siding with novelty. Given how nobody in your village trusts them, your neighbor tried one once and ended up flooding his field because the sand stuck. You lean on your spear, the clock's drip pulling you back to reality. The sand timer on the cart's gone still, probably clogged, and you feel a smug satisfaction. Water clocks aren't perfect either, yours. Clogs with silt sometimes, like that time you got yelled at for letting the canal overflow, but they're predictable, tied to the river's rhythm, and you can't imagine guarding without one. You glance at the stars, their slow crawl across the sky confirming the clock's accuracy. The priests would say Nana, the moon god, approves. But you're just glad your shift's almost over. Your fellow guard shuffles up, his beard catching moonlight as he checks the clock. He grunts, muttering about thieves. And you nod, trying to look vigilant despite your drooping eyelids. The granaries are quiet, but you're not taking chances, not with the king's harvest at stake. You grin, picturing your modern self trying to guard with a flashlight and a podcast, only to realize Sumerian nights are too dark for distractions. Here, it's just you, the stars, and that dripping clock, its rhythm syncing with your heartbeat. Water clocks beat sand timers hands down, keeping Uruk's nights orderly while sand just sits there, sulking. You settle back, the Euphrates hum in your ears, and wait for the drip to signal your freedom. The Sumerian night is deep now, the stars above Uruk twinkling like they're gossiping about your aching legs. The Euphrates' soft hum carries through the cool air, a reminder of the river that shaped every drip of your day. You're still guarding the granaries, your spear more a comfort blanket than a weapon, and that water clock on its clay pedestal keeps dripping, its rhythm the only thing keeping you from dozing off. Your shift's almost done, thank Nana, and the village is stirring as dawn creeps closer. But before you're free, you're roped into joining a festival at the temple, a big one, where water clocks aren't just tools, they're the pulse of Sumerian celebration. You're about to see how these dripping bowls turn chaos into sacred rhythm under the fading stars. You trudge toward the temple district, the granary safe behind you, and the ziggurat looms ahead, its steps glowing faintly in torchlight. The air's thick with incense and the buzz of a crowd, farmers, traders, kids, all gathered for the Akitu festival, a spring celebration to honor the gods and beg for a good harvest. You're exhausted, but festivals are non-negotiable in Sumer, skipping ones like spitting in Enki's face. You weave through the crowd, your tunic still gritty from the fields, and spot a massive water clock near the temple's altar. its clay surface carved with crescent moons. It's timing the rituals, ensuring every chant and offering hits the divine sweet spot. You stand there, half awake, as the crowd hums with anticipation. Festivals in Sumer were clockwork affairs, and historians back this with texts from Ur, around 2500 BCE, describing water clocks used to pace Akitu's multi-day rituals. These weren't your field's chipped bowl. They were temple-grade, calibrated to measure hours with eerie precision. The clock you're gawking at is running the show. Its drips dictate when priests chant, when goats are sacrificed, when the crowd kneels. You watch a priest adjust it, pouring water with the focus of a sculptor, and realize this is why Sumerians love their clocks. They make even chaos feel orderly. You smirk, imagining your modern self trying to live stream the festival, only to realize your phone's battery died in 3000 BCE. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some festival clocks were filled with river water mixed with honey, supposedly to sweeten the god's mood. You can picture yourself sneaking a sip, thinking it's dessert, only to get banished for sacrilege. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether water clocks at festivals were purely ceremonial or also practical, ensuring rituals didn't drag into the night. You're betting on ceremonial, given how the crowd's staring at this clock like it's Enki's personal stopwatch. The priests start chanting, their voices rising as the clock's water level drops. You're supposed to join in, but you're distracted, watching the drip sync with the rhythm of the crowd's claps. It's hypnotic, like the night's heartbeat, and you feel a strange pull, like you're part of something bigger. Torches flicker, casting shadows on the ziggurat, and the air smells of roasted barley and myrrh. You glance at a kid nearby, wide-eyed, clutching a clay figurine, and wonder if he's as tired as you are. Probably not, he's got youth and no blisters. You grin, picturing your modern self trying to Instagram this, captioning it. Akitu vibes before the priests confiscate your phone. The ritual peaks. A goat's led to the altar, and the crowd falls silent as the priest times the sacrifice with the clock's final drips. You hold your breath, not because you're pious, but because the tension's contagious. The offering's made, the crowd cheers, and you exhale, relieved you didn't sneeze and ruin the moment. The clock's refilled, starting the next phase: feasting, dancing, more prayers. You're handed a barley cake, dense as a rock, and a sip of beer, which tastes like fermented regret. You munch, the festival's energy lifting your spirits, and realize the water clock's not just timing rituals, it's timing your joy, binding everyone in this fleeting moment. As the crowd dances, you lean against a wall, the clock's drip echoing in your ears. You're dead tired, but the festival's rhythm, tied to that dripping bowl, feels like a gift. You mutter a thanks to Inanna, hoping she's not mad about your half-hearted prayers earlier. The Euphrates' hum blends with the chants, and you're starting to get why Sumerians trusted those clocks. They're not just tools, they're the pulse of life. From fields to festivals, you take another bite of cake, the drip, drip, drip your soundtrack, and let the night carry you forward. The Akitu festival's energy still hums through Uruk as dawn paints the sky in soft pinks, the Euphrates catching the light like a sleepy mirror. You're weaving through the dispersing crowd, your tunic stiff with dust and festival sweat, the taste of that rock-hard barley cake lingering like a bad decision. The temple's water clock is still dripping, timing the last prayers. But you're finally free from guard duty and fieldwork, at least for now. You're headed to the market, where the real action is today. Uruk's bazaar is buzzing with traders, and water clocks are everywhere, their drip setting the pace for every haggle and deal. You're about to see how these clay bowls turn chaos into commerce, one drop at a time, at all. You step into the market, a maze of stalls piled with barley, sesame, and clay pots. The air thick with the scents of roasted fish and overripe dates. Merchants shout over each other, donkeys bray, and kids dart through the crowd, snatching crumbs. You're here to trade a small sack of barley for some oil, a task your father insists you won't mess up, though you're not so sure. You spot a trader at a stall, his water clock perched proudly beside a stack of reeds. It's a simple bowl, like the one in your field, but its drip is his lifeline, timing deals to keep the market moving. You linger, watching him haggle with a weaver, both glancing at the clock like it's the final word in their argument. Water clocks were market MVPs in Sumer, with cuneiform records from around 2400 BCE, describing their use to regulate trade schedules and labor shifts. They ensured nobody lingered too long or shortchanged a deal by claiming it's not time yet. You watch the trader mark the clock's water level with a reed, noting when his deal must close. It's a slick system when the water's gone. The price is final. No whining. You grin, imagining your modern self trying to negotiate with an app timer, only to get out-haggled by a Sumerian who's been at this since he was 10. These clocks aren't just about fairness. They're about speed, keeping Uruk's economy from stalling in a swamp of endless bartering. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some traders scratched tally marks on their water clocks to track daily deals, like an ancient spreadsheet etched in clay. You can picture yourself accidentally erasing one with your sweaty palm, then begging the trader not to curse your entire family. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether water clocks in markets were mainly for setting deal deadlines or for coordinating larger trade networks across cities. You're betting on deadlines, given how this trader's eyeing his clock like it's about to steal his lunch. You step up to the stall, clutching your barley sack, and the trader sizes you up, his eyes flicking to the clock. You stammer out your offer, trying to sound confident, but he's already countering, pointing at the dripping bowl like it's his lawyer. You're sweating not just from the heat, but from the pressure of those drips. You glance at the clock. It's water halfway gone, and realize you've got to close this deal fast or walk away empty-handed. You haggle harder, throwing in a promise of extra barley next harvest, and he finally nods, marking the deal on a clay tablet. You exhale, feeling like you just survived a lion attack, and hand over the sack. As you walk away with your jar of oil, you notice other traders checking their clocks, their drips sinking the market's chaos into a strange harmony. You smirk, picturing your modern self trying to explain Black Friday to these guys, only to get laughed out of the bazaar. But here, in Uruk's market, with the Euphrates' hum and the clock's drips in your ears, you're starting to see the genius. Water clocks aren't just timing trades. They're the heartbeat of commerce, keeping everyone from cheating or dawdling. You clutch your oil, dodging a runaway goat, and head home, the festival's chants fading behind you. The drip, drip, drip is still in your head, and it's carrying you through another Sumerian day. The sun's climbing again, its heat creeping back into Uruk as you trudge home from the market, your jar of oil sloshing in your arms. The Euphrates glints nearby, its waters feeding the city's pulse, while the festival's distant chants fade into memory. Your tunic's a gritty, sweat-stained relic, and your feet ache from dodging market goats. But that water clock's drip, drip, drip from the trader's stall still echoes in your mind. You're starting to respect those clay bowls, even if they've been bossing you around all day. Now, as you pass the scribe's quarter, you overhear a different kind of chatter scholars debating the accuracy of water clocks. You're about to dive into a world of Sumerian nerdery, where even the drips are up for debate. And you're wondering if these things are as perfect as everyone claims. You pause near a mud brick courtyard, where a group of scribes is gathered, their shaved heads glinting in the sunlight as they argue over clay tablets. One's holding a water clock, its surface etched with cuneiform, and he's gesturing wildly, splashing water like it's punctuation. You linger, pretending to adjust your sandal, but really, you're eavesdropping. These aren't priests or traders, they're the brainiacs of Uruk, the ones who calculate taxes and map the stars. And right now, they're tearing into whether water clocks can be trusted to measure time accurately. You're no scholar, but you've seen your field's clock clog with silt. So you're curious. Maybe these drips aren't the flawless timekeepers everyone thinks. Water clocks were Sumer's pride, with archaeological finds from Shuruppak around 2500 BCE, showing they were calibrated with surprising precision for their time. Scribes used them to time administrative tasks, like recording lunar cycles or scheduling canal repairs. But they weren't perfect. Heat could speed up evaporation, cold could slow the drip, and a single grain of sand could jam the hole. You've cursed your field's clock for exactly that, flooding the barley when it stalled. The scribe with the clock is arguing they're reliable enough for most tasks, pointing to its steady drip. Another with a beard, like a philosopher's stereotype, scoffs, saying they're only as good as the hands refilling them. Human error's the real problem. You smirk, imagining your modern self tossing in a quip about quartz watches, only to get a blank stare and a tablet thrown at your head. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scribes tested clock accuracy by counting heartbeats against the drips, believing a steady pulse was the ultimate measure. You can picture yourself trying it, getting distracted by a passing donkey, and messing up the count. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether Sumerians prioritized water clock accuracy for practical precision or accepted their flaws as part of divine imperfection. You're leaning toward practicality, given how these scribes are practically pulling their beards out over a few missed drips. You edge closer, the oil jar heavy in your arms, and catch more of the argument. The first scribe insists clocks can be standardized with careful calibration, maybe using a fixed volume of water from the Euphrates. The skeptic counters that no two clocks drip the same one's hole might be wider, another's clay more porous. You nod, thinking of your field's clock, which always seems to run slow when you're desperate for a break. The debate's getting technical, with talk of measuring drips against star movements, and you're starting to zone out. You grin, picturing your modern self suggesting a lab test for drip rates, only to realize Sumerians don't do controlled experiments, they do arguments and prayers. The scribes notice you, and one shoots you a look like you're a stray goat in their lecture hall. You mumble an apology and shuffle off, but their words stick. You've always taken water clocks for granted, but now you're wondering if they're more art than science. Your field's clock, the temples, the traders, they all drip differently. Yet Uruk keeps ticking. You pass another clock by a canal, its water low, and check it out of habit. It's not perfect, but it's kept your barley alive. You mutter a thanks to Enki, half joking, and head home, the ziggurat fading behind you. The drip, drip, drip is still in your ears. And despite the scribe's doubts, it's the rhythm that holds your world together. The Sumerian day is winding down now, the sun sinking low, casting long shadows across Uruk's mud-brick houses as the Euphrates glows like liquid gold. You're finally home, your oil jar stashed safely, your tunic a crusty map of sweat and dust from fields, festivals, and market haggling. Your feet throb, your back's a tragedy, and you're pretty sure you've got a new blister to commemorate your granary guard duty. That water clock in the corner of your hut keeps dripping, its clay bowl a quiet sentinel, timing the last chores before you collapse onto your reed mat. You're exhausted, but as you sit by the fire, chewing a final hunk of barley bread, You're starting to think about those water clocks not just as taskmasters, but as something bigger. You're about to reflect on their legacy, how they shaped Sumer and whispered through history. Lulling you towards sleep under the starlit sky, you lean back, the fire's flicker warming your face, and glance at the clock. Its drip is softer now, almost soothing, like the Euphrates hum you've heard all day. From the fields to the temple, the market to the granaries, those clay bowls have been your constant companion, measuring every moment of your life. They're not just tools, they're the backbone of Uruk, turning the river's chaos into order. Historians trace their impact beyond Sumer, with later Babylonian and Egyptian texts, around 2000 BCE, describing water clocks refined from Sumerian designs. These drips didn't just time barley harvests, they laid the groundwork for astronomy, law, and even early science. As people learned to measure the invisible flow of hours, you yawn, thinking how your field's chipped bowl is a tiny piece of that big story. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Sumerian clocks were buried with their owners, as if time could follow them to the afterlife. You picture yourself insisting on taking your hut's clock to the grave, only to have your father roll his eyes and call it a waste of clay. But there's a debate here. Historians still argue whether water clocks were Sumer's greatest invention or just a stepping stone to later timekeeping, like sundials and mechanical gears. You're rooting for greatest, given how every part of your day work, worship, trade hinged on those drips. Without them, Uruk would have been a mess of missed prayers and flooded fields. You take a sip of weak beer. Its sour tang, a poor substitute for the coffee you'll never know. And think about the scribes' debate you overheard. Their fussing over accuracy feels distant now, like a quarrel between stars. Water clocks aren't perfect, but they're enough to keep the barley growing. The gods appeased, the market humming. You smirk, imagining your modern self trying to pitch a smartwatch to Uruk's priests, only to be laughed off as a heretic. But here, in the firelight, with the drip, drip, drip blending into the night's quiet, you get it. Those clocks are Sumer's heartbeat, tying you to the river, the gods, and everyone else in this dusty, vibrant city. Your mother's tending the clock now, refilling it for tomorrow's chores. Her hands steady despite a day as long as yours. You feel a pang of gratitude, remembering the woman in the hut last night, her lamplight flickering over her own clock. Time's not just for kings or priests, it's for everyone, stitched into every corner of Sumerian life. You finish your bread, the fire's warmth pulling you towards sleep, and let your eyes drift to the stars through the hut's doorway. They're moving, just like the water, just like time. And you wonder if the gods are watching, counting drips in their own cosmic clock. Wind down as you sink onto your reed mat. The fire's glow softens, its crackle fading into a gentle hum, like the Euphrates whispering goodnight. The water clock's drip slows in your mind, each drop a quiet promise that tomorrow will come, steady and sure. You're not in the fields anymore, not guarding granaries or haggling in markets. You're just here, wrapped in the warmth of a Sumerian night, the stars above holding secrets older than Uruk itself. Those water clocks, with their simple clay and endless drips, carried a whole civilization through days like yours, from dawn's heat to dusk's cool embrace. They're gone now, buried in time's own river, but their rhythm lives on in every tick of a clock, every beat of your heart. Let the drip, drip, drip fade. Let the Euphrates sing you to sleep and drift into dreams where time is soft, endless, and kind. Sleep well. Traveler, the stars are keeping watch,